So just a couple quick points. So I know that two of you were not here last time when we talked about the paper 2 assignment. If you hang out for a minute after class, I'll give you the assignment sheet. It's also posted on Georgia View, so you can look at it there if you lose the physical sheet. We're a little bit behind on the timeline stuff, and that's partly my fault from being out last week, and also because I've just been slow to purchase more poster board. So we'll try to catch up on those next time. And so if you have something you've been sitting on, bring them, and make sure that you have at least kind of 3 for talking about British women in the 20th and 21st centuries.
Okay, so it's just the 3, right?
Yeah.
For the women. Okay,
Yep.
cool. Just wanted to check on that.
Yep. And we're going to be doing Mina Loy's Feminist Manifesto and Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own and Professions for Women next time, right? So that's all in Volume F. So we're bringing the green one for next time, right? Okay, does anybody have any questions about anything that's coming up or anything that we're doing this week? All right, great. So what y'all think of Goblin Market? Okay. Interesting, creepy, okay.
Oh, weird, yeah.
Okay. What did you find weird or creepy about it? Yeah,
It got a little weird at that moment, but
Yeah,
it's like, wait, is this supposed to be weird, or is she supposed to be, she's saving her life, whatever?
Yeah, and I think that like you're both right, essentially, right? There is something really sexual about a lot of the language of the poem, right? And not just in that particular part.
The fruit,
And what's that?
the fruit is weird and sort of sexual sounding, because the men were being very vivacious about it.
Vivacious about it. Okay, I like that particular phrasing. Yeah, but yeah, this is like one of the end. The scene at the end is one of those that a lot of literary scholars kind of zero in on for a variety of reasons. One, because of the kind of like potential queer subtext. Also because of certain religious connotations of like the body as a consumable good. So, you know, we'll look at a couple of these kind of different angles on it, right? But I think there are other things going on in the poem that I think might help us read that weird ending, or like kind of find the most effective possible reading for the weird ending. Was there anything else that you guys picked up on in this poem?
The men she talked about them like they were rodents, but it was almost like she was attracted to it.
Okay. Yeah,
It was weird.
yeah, who are the only men in the poem?
They were goblins.
Yeah, there are no other male figures, right? Yeah, the goblins are the only men.
I feel like forbidden fruit was another meaning.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That's cool. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Because, you know, Adam and Eve, she ate the fruit.
Uh-huh.
And then in this one, they're attracted to it.
Yeah, that's what I kept thinking, was that it
Yeah.
was weird. One had a cat face, one was a tail, and it was like she was saying that she wanted to go over there and wanted to get the fruit, but
Yeah.
she was talking about a cat face and a tail and a snail, and I
Uh-huh.
was like, why? Why
But
are you interested?
and it doesn't seem especially weird to her that the goblins have these animal features, right?
Right.
And in fact, like, when we think about the word goblin, like, what do we usually imagine?
A small, creepy, scary creature.
Okay, a small, creepy, scary little creature, right? Like maybe with pointy ears and a long nose and sharp teeth, right?
Yeah, I literally
Yes.
picture that movie, Go Afraid of the Dark, or whatever's in the dark, whatever, I can't remember. They're like literally this big, they're like little rat monkeys, that's what I picture.
Are you thinking? Are you afraid of the dark? The
Yeah,
old show
maybe
that
that's
used
it,
to be on
and it's like
Nickelodeon? Yeah.
downstairs in the dungeon place, whatever, and
Uh-huh.
they literally like little monkey rats.
Yeah,
Terrifying.
yeah,
That's what I think.
yeah. So they're like kind of like these ugly little fairy creatures, right? That are mean and dangerous. Do these goblins look mean or dangerous?
I can't really tell. Because I mean,
Uh-huh.
a cat face and a tail, but
It could be like Beauty and the Beast.
Okay.
So like, they're probably really ugly, you know,
Uh-huh.
but, you know, they're still attracted to it, and it's also probably because they're the only male figure in a bunch of women.
Yeah.
You see where I'm going with that?
Okay, sure. But I think, like, I think I would be more willing to buy the goblins as scary if, like, they weren't all kind of like, they're not described in terms of scary animals, right? They're described mostly in terms of like cute fuzzy animals, like a cat and a wombat, you know, a parrot.
I did write rodents.
What's that?
I did write, when I was writing notes, I said rodents.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So yeah, I mean, they're kind of like, if you think about the kinds of animals that they're featured, that they have the features of, right? They're kind of cute, right? Now that doesn't, you know, that still makes, you know, perhaps, you know, sexual attraction to goblins a little bit strange, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, the goblins themselves don't look particularly threatening, right? Oh, look, it's a little kitty cat man, you know. It's or that one looks like a badger, you know. It's,
This is more curiosity.
yeah. But I think the thing that's attractive is not so much the goblins themselves as the fruit, right? The fruit is the draw.
The fruit.
Yes. The fruit is what they want.
I do want that fruit.
Well, and let's just look at like the first verse paragraph of the poem, where the fruits the goblins are selling are described, right? So it's page 542 in this edition. Right? It's morning and evening, maids heard the goblins cry, "Come buy our orchard fruits, come buy, come buy." So let's stop on that word orchard fruits, right? If we're talking about orchard fruits, what does that mean? Where do these fruits come from? Are they wild or are they cultivated? Yeah, cultivated fruits. Okay, good. Come buy, come buy. Apples and quinces, lemons and oranges, plump unpecked cherries, melons and raspberries, bloom down-cheeked peaches, swart-headed mulberries, wild freeborn cranberries, crab apples, dewberries, pineapples, blackberries, apricots, strawberries, all ripe together in summer weather. Morns that pass by, fair eves that fly, come buy, come buy. Our grapes fresh from the vine, pomegranates full and fine, dates and sharp bullaces, rare pears and greengages, damsons and bilberries, taste them and try. Currants and gooseberries, bright fire-like barberries, figs to fill your mouth, citrons from the south, sweet to tongue and sound to eye, come buy, come buy. So, what's the first thing we notice in all this big list of fruits? Okay, it's pretty detailed. Yeah, there's a lot of different kinds of fruit on offer here, right?
Trying to be pleasing to every kind of eye.
Okay, yeah, they're trying to please all tastes, right? And a lot of these fruits, to an English audience, would be exotic, right? Do pineapples grow in England or dates? The answer is no. So most of the, like citrons, right? I mean, you know, some of these things you've never heard of, right? And that would have also probably been the case for people like Laura and Lizzie, right? The only place you might see these would be in a big city marketplace. And indeed, the goblins' cries are modeled on London street sellers' cries. Right? If you had a stall in a marketplace, or if you just kind of walked up and down the street selling your goods, right? You usually developed a pitch, right? A little saying or a short poem or something that you would shout to attract people to your booth or to come buy your stuff, right? So, like, for example, when we looked at the William Blake poems about the chimney sweep, right? The little boy talks about how he would go, walk around crying, weep, 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 right? Because he can't pronounce the S in sweep yet. But, what he's doing there is walking around offering his services as a chimney sweep, right? Same thing's happening here with the goblins, but it's much more elaborate, right? In part because the thing that they're offering is a lot more exotic. Now, who hears the goblins cry as well? Women. More specifically, what's that? Maids, yes. Maids hear the goblins cry. Specifically, right, virgins hear it. What's that?
It's setting up an entire reason for us to believe what is actually happening.
Yeah. Well, and just to kind of backtrack a little bit, this is essentially a fairy tale. And fairy tales often do have strong psychosexual subtexts, right? In part because, even though we kind of relegate them to children's literature now, they weren't really intended for kids, right? Because, and in the era that this poem is written, and I don't think we really had much of a chance to talk about this because we had to rearrange the syllabus a bit. This is, in the early 1860s, the whole idea of the child as something separate from the adult is actually pretty new in 1860, right? Prior to this, children were largely just regarded as little adults. Now, by 1859 to 1862, when this poem is being composed and then published, upper class children are starting to be recognized as a different category of development, right? Working class children, not so much. They're still going out and working in factories, working in mines, things like that. But upper class children are spending longer periods of time in school. And there develops this kind of cult of the child, right? The childhood is this kind of sacred space in life, where you have time for exploration and play. And as such, a new kind of children's literature begins to appear, and older forms of literature, like the fairy tale, become kind of appropriated for children. And fairy tales are all over the place in Victorian England, right? You have translations of The Thousand and One Nights. You have translations of Grimm's fairy tales. The 18th century French fairy tales of Charles Perrault, Puss in Boots and Cinderella. These would be found in just about any Victorian nursery. And we know that a lot of those stories, think about Little Red Riding Hood, for example, right? Also have these very, very strong psychosexual subtexts, right? Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that Rossetti intends any of this, right? But the fact that we see it so easily, right, means that there is something there, right? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about these two sisters then, Laura and Lizzie. How do Laura and Lizzie differ from each other?
Laura's more level-headed and Lizzie's more get up and go, finish.
Are you sure you've got the right description for each of the attached to each of the names there?
I'm more curious.
Laura's the curious one, yeah. Laura's the one who wants to go check out the goblins, right? Yeah, Laura is curious, and Lizzie is cautious. Now this might actually be a good place to remember what those kind of two opposing poles of Victorian womanhood were that we talked about last time.
Traditional and not that one.
Does this phrase ring a bell?
Oh, yeah, fallen angel and angel of the house.
Yeah, the angel in the house and the fallen woman, right? Now, do you remember what the angel in the house, what the characteristics of the angel in the house were?
Mother watching over the family,
Okay, you
taking
have
care of the house.
mother watching over the family, taking care of the house, right, and providing a moral center for the family, right?
She reminds the husband he's supposed to come back home and do the
Yeah,
things.
yeah. She's supposed to like.
Morality.
Yeah, exactly. She's a model of good behavior, right? A kind of external conscience, almost, right?
He definitely is the morality. Gosh, I wish I thought.
But yeah, the angel in the house, remember, exists not for her own sake, right? But primarily for her husband and her children's sake. Now, what about the fallen woman?
Woman is the woman that's like, she fell to the sexual thing or whatever.
Yeah, so essentially a fallen woman is a middle-class woman who has committed some kind of sexual impropriety, right? And as a result, all good and right-thinking people are supposed to shun her, right? I'm sorry, what were we going to say, Bethany?
I was just going to say she's been from society.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Like the scholar or whatever, with an A costume.
Yeah, that's actually a good example. I mean, it's a pre-Victorian example, but yeah, it's the same sort of thing where Hester Prynne is cut off from 17th century Puritan society for having a baby under wedlock. Yeah. And so the usual trajectory in art and literature, and it's questionable the extent to which the fallen woman or the angel in the house actually existed outside of art and literature. But yeah, in art and literature, the fallen woman usually either falls to homelessness and prostitution and alcoholism and whatever, right? So that one sexual sin at some point in her life leads to a downward spiral from which she cannot recover and cannot be redeemed, right? That's the Victorian stereotype. And I think that we need to keep these both in mind as we read the poem, because it's actually doing something really interesting with these stereotypes and really unusual with them. All right, so let's just sort of continue looking at the poem here. Can I get somebody to start reading from that kind of the beginning of that second verse paragraph, evening by evening among the brookside rushes.
Evening by evening among the brookside rushes, who lore about her head to hear, Lizzie veiled her blushes, crouching close together. In the cooling weather, with clasping arms and cautioning lips, with twinkling cheeks and fingertips, lie close, Laura said, perking up her golden head. We must not look at the goblin men, we must not buy their fruits. Who knows upon what soil they fed their hungry, thirsty roots? Come by, called the goblins, hobbling down the glen. Oh, cried Lizzie, Laura, Laura, you should not peep at goblin men. Lizzie covered up her eyes, covered close lest they should look. Laura reared her glossy head and whispered like the rest of the floor. Look, Lizzie, down the glen tramp little men. One hauls a basket, one bears a plate, one lugs a golden dish of many pounds weight. How fair the vine must grow, whose grapes are so luscious. How warm the wind must blow through those fruit-girdled bushes. No, said Lizzie, no, no, no. Their offers should not charm us, their evil gifts would harm us. She thrust a dimpled finger in each ear, shut eyes and ran. Curious Laura chose to linger, wondering at each merchant man.
Okay, we can stop here, right? So let's just kind of observe each sister's response here to the goblins. So we've already determined that Laura's the curious one and Lizzie's the cautious one, right? So what's Lizzie's reaction to seeing the goblins trooping up and down, waving their, trying to sell their fruits.
She's trying to stop him. She's like, no, don't feed into it. Don't push yourself bow down to that woman.
Yeah, and I mean, too, like, what's the extent that she goes to here?
She's like,
She didn't look
Yeah, she won't look at them, she won't listen to them. Right?
she's like closing her hair.
Yeah, it's like, have you ever seen like the little monkeys of the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil? Yeah, that's kind of what she's doing, right? She closes her eyes, thrusts her fingers in her ears, and turns and runs away. Bless you. While Laura, despite kind of questioning where the fruit is coming from, right, hangs around to watch and is fascinated by the goblins and is tempted by the fruit, right? I think, there's a couple of lines I want to kind of focus on here for a second. We must not look at goblin men, we must not buy their fruits. Who knows upon what soil they fed their hungry, thirsty roots? What's going on there? What's she pointing out about the goblin's orchard fruits?
You should trust them.
You don't know what they put in the fruits.
Yeah, you don't know where they came from, right? And I think there's actually something a little bit, and this will maybe come out a little bit more as we look at what Laura and Lizzie do on their own farm, right? But I think there's actually something a little bit nationalistic in here as well. Because remember how so many of the fruits that the goblins sell are foreign fruits, right? So who knows what kind of soil a pineapple grows in, right? Certainly not, two country girls in England. So there's a kind of suspicion there of these kinds of foreign goods, right? But one thing that we have to remember about Britain in the 1860s, right, is that it's the center and metropolis of an enormous empire. And the average British person in this period is getting more access to goods from all over the world, right? From Africa, from South Asia, from China, due to imperialist activities, from the Caribbean as well, right? So, these goods from other parts of the empire are being consumed by more and more people in Britain. And I think that there is a little bit of suspicion in the poem about these goods that are not produced at home, right? Because if we then turn to page 546, can I get somebody to read the verse paragraph that starts with early in the morning when the first cock crowed his warning?
Early in the morning, when the first cock crowed his warning, we like bees, so sweet and busy. Laura rose with Lizzie, fetched in honey, milked the cows. Aired and set to rights the house, kneaded cakes and white as wheat. Cakes for dainty mouths to eat, next churned butter, whipped up cream. Fed the poultry, sat and sewed. Talked as modest maidens should. Lizzie with an open heart, Laura in an absent dream. One content, one sick in part. One content, one sick in part. One warbling for the mere bright day's delight. One longing for the night.
Okay, thank you. So, what's this verse paragraph describing?
What they do.
Yeah, what they do in a day, right? And what does their day seem to mostly consist of?
Tending to the farm.
Yeah, just honest farm labor, right? So they have their own farm that they work themselves, right? Without any help from anyone else, right? They're, as we've already noted, the only men around seem to be the goblins. So, do they need the goblins' fruit for anything? Yeah, they produce everything they need, right? And the humble food that their farm produces is presented here as being more wholesome than the fruits that they get from the goblins, right? So there's this kind of argument here, I think, for female self-sufficiency in an era in which men are supposed to be going out and doing the earning, right? But here we have two sisters working a farm together with no need for any kind of masculine intervention, right? Now, when we look at Laura's encounter with the goblins, can we turn to page 544, line 115, but sweet tooth Laura spoke in haste. Can someone please read that for us?
The sweet tooth Laura spoke in haste. Good folk, I have no coin to take were you purloin, were to purloin.
Mm-hmm.
I have no copper in my purse, I have no silver either. And all my gold is on the furs that shakes in windy weather, above the rusty heather. You have much gold upon your head, they answered all together. Buy from us with a golden curl. She clipped a precious golden lock.
Okay, let's pause there for a second, right? And just focus on this moment. What does Laura not have any of?
Money.
She doesn't have any money, right? She doesn't actually need money, right? Because the farm produces everything she needs. Plus, money in the Victorian mind is very much associated with commerce, right? Which is a masculine activity, right, to the Victorians, something that women would normally be largely excluded from. So she doesn't have any money. So what does she use as currency instead? A lock of her hair, right. Now let's think back to the Mary Shelley story, to the mortal immortal, right? What was Bertha's currency? Her beauty, yeah. And the same thing's happening here, right? They're asking Laura to pay for the fruit with her beauty, right? Now let's continue here from she dropped a tear more rare than pearl.
She dropped a tear more rare than pearl, then sucked their fruit loaves, fair or red. Sweeter than honey from the rock, sweeter than made rejoicing wine. Clearer than water flowed that juice, she never tasted such before. How should it cloy with length of use? She sucked and sucked and sucked the more. Fruits which that unknown orchard bore. She sucked until her lips were sore, then flung the empty rinds away, but gathered up one kernel stone, and knew not was it night or day, and she turned home alone.
Okay, thank you. So, in addition to paying with her beauty, what else do the goblins seem to expect her to do?
You get right there, table.
Yeah, they wanted to party with them, right?
Right.
So she's paying with her beauty and with her company. And, we talked about how the end of the poem has a strong kind of sexual subtext, right? But this almost feels like it's not even subtext, right?
Right.
That, the kind of like lack of restraint that she shows when eating the goblin's fruit. Like the language used to describe the process of consumption here is essentially like erotic language, right? So yeah, this does seem to be a kind of symbolic deflowering, right? And no, what does she take with her as she leaves? Yeah, she takes a kernel stone, right? What's a kernel stone?
Like
Yeah. Why would you do that? Why would you take the kernel stone?
So you can plant it.
Yeah, it's a seed, right? Right, hoping to grow more. And then she returns home to her sister's scolding, right? Lizzie met her at the gate, full of wise upbraidings. Dear, you should not stay so late. Twilight is not good for maidens. Should not loiter in the glen, in the haunts of goblin men. Do you not remember Jeannie, how she met them in the moonlight, took their gifts both choice and many, ate their fruits and wore their flowers, plucked from bowers where summer ripens at all hours? But ever in the noonlight she pined and pined away, sought them by night and day, found them no more, but dwindled and grew gray, then fell with the first snow, while to this day no grass will grow where she lies low. I planted daisies there a year ago that never blow. You should not loiter so. So there's actually a lot packed into this relatively short passage, right? What do we learn from this about maids who traffic with the goblins? They die, right?
Well, it's exactly what happened to her, would have happened to her.
Uh-huh.
If she grew old or dwindled away.
Yeah, they essentially kind of wither away, right?
She looked for him, she couldn't find him.
Yeah,
She couldn't hear him anymore.
yeah. Once a maid has gone to the goblins once, right? Once they get you, they're no longer interested in you, right? They just abandon you. What's that?
So one night stand.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. That's basically what you get, right?
We used to, we already got what we wanted from him.
Yeah.
I'm not really nowadays. I kept trying to figure out if it was actually just strictly sexual and I wasn't getting it
Uh-huh.
because of all of the, like that, for instance.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that,
Because I was like, dang, I just think I'm not understanding what's going on.
no, I think it sounds like you really actually were understanding what was going on better than you thought. I mean, like the language is sing-songy and almost childlike, right? It's written in pretty simple language. Like this is, very much, in a lot of ways, a loss of innocence poem. And I think that it's working on, like, in addition to just kind of the literal story about the fruit and the goblins, it's also working on, a level of kind of like initiation into sexuality, and also the world of commerce. So there's an economic as well as a sexual level to this, right? That's operating on a couple different planes at once. But the other thing that I want to note here is what happens to Jeannie's grave. What do we notice about Jeannie's grave?
The flowers won't grow on it.
Yeah, no grass grows, no flowers grow, right? What does that suggest?
Well, if the flowers and the grass aren't growing, that means there's no nutrition in the soil for them to grow, so that means there's some kind of poison or something in grass.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
infertility, right? Yeah. So Jeannie's union with the goblins produces nothing, right? It's actually this. We're not too far off here in some ways from the world of T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. I don't think this is a direct influence on the Wasteland in any way, and if it was, Eliot probably wouldn't have said so, because he'd rather you think that it was influenced by some esoteric mystical text from the Middle Ages, right? But yeah, I think there are some similar anxieties at work here. And yeah, one of those anxieties is over, I think, infertility. We also see here, though, who takes care of Jeannie's grave and tries to and plants flowers on it and things things like that? Yeah. And this, we're not going to pull too much out of this yet, right? But this foreshadows, I think, the basic arguments that the poem is making, right? Jeannie would fall into what basic Victorian category?
Oh, she's gonna fall.
Yeah, the fallen woman, right? And what is a good middle-class girl supposed to do when she meets a fallen woman, or when her friend becomes a fallen woman?
Shun her.
Shun, right? But does Lizzie do that? Yeah, she doesn't, right?
Because she's a better woman.
She's a good sister.
She
Yeah.
has a better moral compass.
Uh-huh. But for the period, right?
Yeah.
And for her class, it's an unconventional moral compass. But yeah, we'll see that Lizzie doesn't pay any price for that, right? Or at least not any social price that we can see in the poem, right?
Well, I mean, she was kind of attacked by goblins. So
Yeah. Let's
some kind of price.
yeah. But she does it to help another woman, right? Whom social codes say she shouldn't.
Exactly.
Yeah, so a lot of the poem is really kind of about Lizzie's defiance of the ordinary social order. So let's look at, well, first I want to quickly note, like, what is, like, in terms of the whole theme with Jeannie and the grave and the flowers that don't grow and all that, right? What do we notice, what happens with Laura's kernel stone?
I do not think of only that.
If you look on page 548, line 269. Day after day, night after night, Laura kept watch in vain. In sullen silence of exceeding pain, she never caught again the goblin cry, "Come by, come by." She never spied the goblin men, hawking their fruits along the glen. But when the noon waxed bright, her hair grew thin and gray, she dwindled as the fair full moon doth turn to swift decay and burn her fire away. One day, remembering her kernel stone, she set it by a wall that faced the south, dewed it with tears, hoped for a root, watched for a waxing shoot, but there came none. It never saw the sun, it never felt the trickling moisture run, while with sunk eyes and faded mouth she dreamed of melons as a traveler sees, false waves and desert drought, with shade of leaf-crowned trees, and burns the thirstier in the sandful breeze.
Never grew.
Yeah, she plants it and nothing happens, right? So nothing comes of these experiences with the goblins, right? It's a dead end.
Because the seed never grew.
Yeah,
And how it could because of the soul.
yeah. Yeah, again, here we're talking about funny foreign fruits, right? So let's look at what happens when Lizzie tries to buy from the goblins. Right? If you look on page 550, can I get somebody to start reading from line 363? Good folk, said Lizzie, mindful of Jeannie.
Good folks of Lizzie, mindful of Jeannie, give me much and many. Held out her apron, tossed up her penny. Nay, take a seat with us, honor and eat with us. They answered grinning. Our feast is but beginning, night yet is early, warm and dew pearly, wakeful and starry, such fruits as these no man can carry. Half their bloom would fly, half their dew would dry, half their flavor would pass by. Sit down and feast with us, buy one could guest with us, cheer you and rest with us. Thank you, said Lizzie, but one waits at home alone for me. So without further parleying, if you have not sold me any of your fruits, though much and many, give me back my silver penny I tossed you for a fee.
Okay, so how does Lizzie try to pay? Yeah, she tosses them a silver penny, right? She tries to pay with money, right? So she is trying to participate in that masculine world of commerce. And how do they respond? Will they accept her penny?
No, they just want her to hang out, and they're gonna watch her get close.
Yeah. They want her to party with them like her sister did, right?
Mhm.
And what excuses do they give?
She's a guest.
Yeah, okay, you're a guest, yeah. Our feast is but beginning, right?
Not as early.
Uh-huh.
If they said the bloom would fly, the dew would dry, and then the flavor would pass by.
Yeah. That apparently you can't take the fruits home, right?
Yeah, that was what I thought was curious,
Uh-huh.
because does that mean that it wouldn't work? Like, you wouldn't die from poison if you left and weren't around the goblins?
I don't know, like honestly, like I read this and I think about like all the times, like just because it's so damn humid here, like, you know, when I walk home a thing of blackberries from the supermarket, which is around the corner from my house, and by the time I get home, there's already freaking mold on it.
Yeah.
But no, I think yeah,
Could be, yeah.
yeah, but yeah, the way they're describing their fruits here, right, is that these are things that can only be consumed and enjoyed in the moment, right?
Or they could be magically making them real pretty.
Well, you know,
They
and
would
that,
use pretty and paint them away.
yeah, and that's a common element in fairy tales, right? I don't know if y'all know the root of the word glamour, right? What do we usually use the word glamour to mean?
Like glamorous?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Dolled
like,
up, mixed up.
Yeah, somebody who's glamorous is done up to look beautiful, right? Glamour is actually an old Scots word that refers to illusion magic. So the fruits might be glamored up, right? This was something that, you know, fairies were commonly supposed to do, right? They would do things like, you know, make a pile of dried leaves look like gold,
Right.
things like that, right? And then when you try to spend them, they turn back into leaves.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so that this could be sort of like some kind of fairy trick, right? But it also seems to correlate with the experience of the girls who go and do party with the goblins, right? Nothing that they bring home with them produces anything. And in fact, like, you know, they get a great deal of joy in the moment and nothing thereafter, right? So the fruits seem to be like kind of like ephemeral, right? It's just like essentially like a one-night passing thing. And then how do the goblins respond when Lizzie won't eat the fruit with them?
They're mad, they try to force her to do it.
Yeah. And it gets pretty nasty, right?
And scratching and
Yeah. They begin,
barking, hewing, hissing.
yeah.
forced her to eat.
They
Uh-huh.
try to force her.
She still didn't do it. She's badass.
Yeah, it's but yeah, like it's all done in language that almost kind of sounds like sexual assault, right?
And yeah, see that's why I kept going, I'm just wrong.
Yeah. But that's the thing is, yeah, like clearly you saw what was going on here, right? You were able to read the allegory here, like read the symbolism. Yeah. So yeah, don't say you were wrong.
I don't have a dirty mind, it's just the whole poem is annotating.
Yeah, I mean the poem lends itself easily to that kind of reading, right? But yeah, so yeah, the goblins basically assault her, and she brings the fruit back to Laura, right? Or at least the juices. Now, this is where things, in terms of Victorian discourses, get really weird. I'm not even talking about Laura consuming the fruit off of Lizzie, but I'm just talking about Lizzie's behavior in general, right? the attempt to rescue the fallen woman in the first place. If you look on page 553, right, we see Laura's response to the consumption of the fruit, right? Swift fire spread through her veins, knocked at her heart, met the fire smoldering there, and overbore its lesser flame. She gorged on bitterness without a name. Ah, fool, to choose such part of soul-consuming care. Sense failed in the mortal strife, like the watchtower of a town, which an earthquake shatters down. Like a lightning-stricken mast, like a wind-uprooted tree, spun about, like a foam-topped waterspout, cast headlong in the sea, she fell at last. Pleasure past and anguish past. Is it death or is it life? Life out of death. That night long Lizzie watched by her, counted her pulses' flagging stir, felt for her breath, held water to her lips and cooled her face with tears and fanning leaves. But when the first birds chirped about their eaves and early reapers plodded to the place of golden sheaves and dew-wet grass, bowed in the new morning wind so brisk to pass, and new buds with new day opened of cup-like lilies on the stream, Laura awoke as from a dream, laughed in the innocent old way, hugged Lizzie but not twice or thrice. Her gleaming locks showed not one thread of gray, her breath was sweet as May, and light danced in her eyes. So what do we think about this?
It's like a spell.
Yeah, it seems like magic, right? Yeah. And it clearly the fruits have that kind of quality. But is it consuming the fruits that brought Laura back? That brought life out of death?
It wasn't the fruit. It was Lizzie.
Yeah, it's Lizzie taking care of her, right? It's Lizzie sitting there watching her, making sure she doesn't die, that ends up restoring her, right? And what do we notice about Laura's state at the end of that second verse paragraph there?
It says, light lamps in her eyes, so that means she was doing much better.
Oh, yeah.
Like she wasn't like, on the verge of death.
Yeah.
And then her gleaming locks, they weren't gray anymore. They were blonde again.
Uh-huh.
So that means the life was like put back in her.
Yeah, there's the whole thing about the new buds and all that sort of thing, right? So yes, like she's restored, and I think it's particularly noteworthy that the hair, the thing that she used to pay the goblins with in the first place, is restored, right? She's got that symbolic beauty back. And because her sister took care of her instead of abandoning her. Days, weeks, months, years afterwards, when both were wives with children of their own, their mother hearts beset with fears, their lives bound up with tender lives, Laura would call the little ones and tell them of her early prime, those pleasant days long gone, of not returning time. Would talk about the haunted glen, the wicked, quaint fruit merchant men, their fruits like honey to the throat, but poison in the blood. Men sell not such in any town. Would tell them how her sister good stood in deadly peril to do her good, and win the fiery antidote. Then joining hands to little hands would bid them cling together. For there is no friend like a sister in calm or stormy weather. To cheer one on the tedious way, to fetch one if one goes astray, to lift one if one totters down, to strengthen whilst one stands. What do you think of that?
It's nice.
Yeah, it is nice.
Yeah, I
Sure,
thought it was
it's,
real sweet.
it is. And there's nothing wrong with it, with it being sweet, right? Like, we tend to disdain emotions like sweetness, right, as being, kind of sentimental or dumb, right? As, not being intellectual enough. But yeah, I mean, there is a sweetness to the end of the poem, alongside a fairly explicit moral lesson, right? So one thing to note is what are we told about Laura and Lizzie at this stage in their lives when they're thinking back? They're both grown up and have children, right? We're told they're both wives, right? But do we have any idea who the hell they're married to?
Yeah.
Yeah, the husbands don't really matter. The husbands are off in their own Victorian sphere doing Victorian male things, right?
It doesn't say anything about sons either.
Yeah, we don't actually know what the gender of the children is, right? That's not made clear, although they talk a lot here about sisters, right? There'd be no friend like a sister. But I think that's part of the broader argument for, on the one hand, women's self-sufficiency, right? And also women lifting each other up instead of pushing each other down. So I think it ends up being a fairly gentle and sweet feminist message, with the almost kind of sentimental picture of little children holding hands with their mothers and all that, right? In what is otherwise sometimes a weird and disturbing poem, right? So I don't know, like what do you? How do we want to read this at the end? Like, what do you guys think?
Well, when I read it, I was like, okay, so it wasn't weird. It was just like sisters, because I would have done that for my sister.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, the way it was written in the beginning, like with the creepy annotations or whatever,
Uh-huh.
weird, creepy, not something you should probably read to children. But
Standards were different in 1862.
not something you should read to children in 2021, or parents would be very mad.
Yeah.
But at the end, it's like, it's sweet. It's like, sisters are forever, it's like that sister bond thing, you should always be
Yeah.
like close to your sibling or whatever, not even just your sister, just a sibling.
Sure.
Like, it's nice at the end, but in the beginning, it's just not, no.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, if you read this to somebody that had no idea what we were doing in this class, they probably would think this is probably a very strong annotation for a prostitution thing.
Uh-huh.
With the males being like, eat my fruit is not fruit.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Well, and that's actually, it's interesting you raise that particular point because of the kind of double standard in Victorian sexual morality, right? That if a woman commits a sexual impropriety, society is done with you, right? You're out. Men could do whatever they wanted as long as they were relatively discreet. So a lot of Victorian middle-class women ended up with syphilis
Yeah. So
because
like
because their husbands were out consorting with prostitutes.
Yeah, the poison in the fruit or whatever, when they
Yeah.
die, is probably like an STD or an STI or STI or something, because
Uh-huh.
that's what I got, honestly, when I read that's what I kind of got the symbolism of.
Yeah.
So, I don't know the same thing. But if you really read it and you like,
Yeah.
if you don't really pay attention to like anything else with like Victorian area or whatever, that you can just be like, yeah, the goblins, the men are just prostituting themselves, giving their
Uh-huh.
fruit. Fruit is clearly not fruit.
Yeah.
And sleeping with the women, giving them an infection of some sort.
Yeah.
And letting
Yeah.
them die.
Yeah.
Moving on to
You
the
really could
next.
though, because it is.
Yeah.
It's obvious that Lizzie
is saying that don't stay out with the goblins after
Uh-huh.
a certain time, after dark. So it
Yeah.
does, like you're sitting there saying, but is it really saying this or this?
Uh-huh.
I'm
Yeah.
confused.
Uh-huh. No, I think that's actually a really good solid reading. Yeah, the essentially part of what happens here, yeah, is that the goblins, give Jeannie and then Laura the clap. Yeah.
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 But like, you can't like, if it's a children's story, if it's a fairy tale, like, you can't really say that is what it really is, but there's like,
Uh-huh.
that's a very strong, solid connotation of what this is.
Yeah. No, I would totally agree. I think that's actually a really good, really smart way to read it.
I wouldn't be able to read it to children.
Because it's really not something you read to children in this day and age.
Yeah.
Maybe back then, because children really wouldn't know what, the
Mhm.
7 STDs are, so.
Yeah,
So-
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I read this to my 8-year-old nephew, he'd be able to identify that
Probably
either, but-
not, but
No, but it's also a good way to say, don't go get candy from Amanda's house.
Yeah, it's
candy
good.
from strangers.
Yeah.
Knowing my children, they would say, I'm gonna go play with the goblins.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna go eat some fruit. I
Well,
love fruit.
I remember one of the many traumatic moments in my childhood. Like I had to, my mother took me to the local hospital. They had a puppet show going, and it was like a don't drink poisons puppet show. And they would let you. They said you could play with the puppets afterwards, and I wanted to play with the Mr. Yuck puppet, the poison symbol puppet. And they told me, no, you can't play with Mr. Yuck. I said, well, why not? You said I could play with the puppets. It's, you don't want to play with Mr. Yuck. He said, but I want to play with Mr. Yuck. And they just wouldn't let me do that. Because I guess they thought that I didn't get the message.
Yeah.
Like, no, I totally understood that I shouldn't drink any, I shouldn't go drink a bottle of bleach or something. It's like, okay, if it's got the Mr. Yuck sticker on it, okay, I don't drink that, fine. But can I just play with the puppet
I
already?
feel like a puppet, man. I don't care about the
Yeah,
bitch. I'm not gonna
yeah.
drink it. I love puppet.
But yeah, it seemed like they like the people running the program didn't think that at my age, I guess I was maybe 4,
I mean,
that I
you
could
were-
differentiate between the puppet and the symbol. Yeah,
You were
it's-
a child. You were naturally attracted to the puppets.
sure, and it was green and fuzzy.
I think, honestly, so in my elementary school, they had like a really bad mishap.
Uh-huh.
They literally brought cocaine into the school to like with drug dogs or whatever, so it was
Oh,
like, don't
jeez.
do drugs, don't do drugs. And then they had it back to the little sugar to give the kids.
Oh man.
You can see what happened.
Yeah.
One of the bags got mixed up. 4 kids went to the hospital.
Oh god.
I still think it's funny to this day.
Uh-huh.
Because like.
I mean, it's no one died, right?
No one
Okay.
died. It was
All
just
right.
they were very
Yes.
terrified. They had a good high.
Yeah, yeah.
They had a
Uh-huh.
very good high.
Uh-huh.
Because they weren't like big bags. They were like little tiny bags or whatever. Just
Uh-huh.
little baby little pill
Oh,
bags. or
I
whatever.
bet those cops were screwed.
Honestly, it was kind of.
Probably depends on the jurisdiction, but
Everybody just kind of said it was an accident, and it was just an accident.
Sure,
like,
sure.
This is little kids. There's hundreds of
Uh-huh.
little kids in there. Like
Yeah.
just going around.
yeah.
Well, you shouldn't do that anyway, I don't think.
I don't know why they brought actual cocaine into school.
Yeah,
With a bunch of
yeah.
3rd, 4th, and 5th graders.
Yeah,
Why?
that seems like a terrible error in judgment.
It was. It
Yeah.
was.
All right, so since we started early, we're at about time here. So let me give you the guide questions for next class. We're going to be continuing, again, like thinking about the whole angel in the house thing when we look at Virginia Woolf and Mina Loy. And Woolf specifically references this. You're probably going to find Loy's manifesto weird. So just be prepared for that.
It'd be weird.